We're on. G'day, boys and girls. Thank you for joining us. Ross and Jono here, going through the Ten Commandments. Not just the Ten Commandments as we are familiar with them in the book of Deuteronomy and Exodus, but the Ten Commandments as it appears in other ancient sources.
Look at this. Look, Jono, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up. Look at that.
Come on.
That's what we're going to be looking at tonight.
Hey, look at this. Wow.
Is
Okay.
that cool or what? Notice all the color. Now, we're going to explain this to people because, first of all, it's in Hebrew and it's color-coded and, yeah, there you go. So we've got
Mark's first in. G'day, Mark. Check out this new... Yeah, don't leave it up there.
Oh, you want me to pull it back up?
Yeah, I want to talk about this in a minute. Don't let it go.
Hold on. Here we go.
Mark, Marlene, g'day to you. Jeffrey, g'day. No, you're third, my friend. You're not first in. All the way from New Zealand there. Just across the pond from where I am.
That's right.
Okay, so this is good. Now, just while we've got this up, while we tell everyone what it is we're doing, or if they've only just tuned in and they wonder what's going on, I just mentioned, obviously, Deuteronomy and Exodus, the first two. We're quite familiar. Just remind everyone what these other sources are and vaguely how old they are. I mean, we understand that the copy of Exodus, Deuteronomy that we have goes back to the Leningrad Codex. It's about 1,000 years old, say, roundabout. So what are these other sources?
Okay, so what we have left to right, Exodus, Deuteronomy, according to the Masoretic text, as you said. Then we have Exodus and Deuteronomy, same text, meaning the same command, the same word, according to the Samaritan Pentateuch. Now, people argue over the dating of the Samaritan Pentateuch, but, so obviously, if you ask those in favor of the Samaritan Pentateuch, they'll give you an earlier date. But it is clearly an ancient text. We're talking about...
So SP, yeah.
And then we have the All Souls Deuteronomy. It is a Dead Sea Scroll. It dates back, to roughly right around maybe a little bit BCE, maybe under 100 years BCE. Then we have the Nash Papyrus, which is actually about the same age, I believe. And then the Shapira, which we think depends on who you ask. I mean, if you ask Edon Dershowitz, he says that the Shapira manuscript dates back to 957 BCE, I think is the date that he applies.
Otherwise known as the Moses Scrolls. So that is the text that we're dealing with. And all the little multicolored bits that you've got there are highlighting the differences between the two. Is that fair?
That's right. We're going to explain. Let me pull one other thing up, Jonah, just because
you pull that up while I say g'day too, because I noticed that Dave's there. G'day, Dave, the one.
Hey, Dave and
Patty. Sue Truo. Who else have we got? Frankie. That'll be DJ as well. Stephen. And g'day, Peggy. No, you're not late. You're right on time, mate. It's all good. Ronnie. G'day, mate. All right. This is good.
Okay, so Jono, let me just say that obviously we're working through the 10 words. If I could adjust that, look, put your eyes above just a little bit. Nice. That's good. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're talking about, this is word 4. This is an English translation of word 4 as it appears. To the left, we have the...
Wait. As you read it, can I bounce my eyes along the text? Like the bouncing balls?
No, don't do that. Please don't do that. We're going to lose viewership. Okay, so on the left, though, what we have is, this is the canonical, the Masoretic text. This is as you'll find it in your Bible, except that it's my literal translation from the Hebrew. So on the left, we have Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12. And on the right, we have Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. All right, that's it. Look at that. All right, so what I want you to do at first, Jono, is people can follow along. This, by the way, is from the document that I've uploaded to my academia page, and I will put that link in the comments below a little bit later. But it's called A Comparison of the 10 Words in English. In fact, while you're reading these, give me the Exodus and then the Deuteronomy. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm going to pull this document and paste the link in the comments.
All right, you do that.
Jono? You ready?
Grand. So it does say. Now, by the way, you've got this says number 4, and that is according to the... What is it? Number 4 according to the... a Catholic and Lutheran tradition. Okay, so according to the Rabbinic Judaism and the Hellenistic Judaism and church fathers, it's number 5. Depending on how you count it, we say this often, but you have to either divide the first one or the last one in order to get 10. You must have 10, because 3 places of the Tanakh refers to the 10. But in fact, there's only 9. But we'll readdress that some other time. This is Exodus. Give weight to your father and to your mother, in order to lengthen your days upon the land that Jehovah your God is giving you. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16 says, give weight to your father and to your mother, which Jehovah your God commanded you. We'll get back to that. In order to lengthen your days, and in order that it may be well with you upon the land that Jehovah your God is giving you. Ross.
Okay. let me say real quickly, and I'm going to pull this off the screen in a moment, but I do want to say I just posted the link. You'll see it on our YouTube channel. It's an academia.edu link, a comparison of the 10 words in English with explanatory notes. So I encourage people to get this. It is a good document. Again, this is my translation. So the first thing I want to highlight, Jono, according to the Bible, according to our Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, the Torah, the Pentateuch, we have these 2 versions side by side for a reason. The only difference is, we can say it that way, is that in Deuteronomy, you'll see the red letters. Now, that's not the red letters that some people are used to, but it is the red letter that where Deuteronomy has more text than Exodus 20. Clearly obvious as you see this. So the first thing we'll point out is in Deuteronomy 5:16, it reads the same, and then it says, as which Jehovah your God commanded you. And then it reads the same again, perfectly in line with Exodus. And then it says, and in order that it be well with you upon the land. Now, if you remove those red sections of text, what you have is basically the same text
as Exodus, yeah.
Now, the way this, and by the way, this came up this week. I had an interview. I'm going to pull this down just for a moment.
Hey, Patty. Hey, Linda.
Hey, Linda. I had an interesting, I recorded, do you still call it recorded? I videoed, Zoom called with Nehemiah Gordon.
Yes.
And we went for 3.5 hours, and we got into all sorts of cool. Oh man, it was wonderful.
I am looking forward to that.
Well, as I understand, Nehemiah is going to, with his team, or I don't know who all his team is. I have a team. It's a one-man show. He's in the back right now working on some things. Everyone now knows Seth, my son, but Nehemiah said his team is going to take those videos and chop them up, because we got into, get this, Jono, we got into Shem Tob's Hebrew Matthew, the Shapira saga, the Shapira manuscript. We got into textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible to a certain degree. The differences in Exodus and Deuteronomy, obviously our views are slightly different there. But we had a wonderful talk. It was very mutually respectful, and I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. So, but one of the things that we brought up, I brought up what you and I have been telling this group, and that is that we, within the canonical Pentateuch, we have these 2 versions, and they don't agree. And Nehemiah's view as a Karaite and as a Hebrew Bible teacher, a fundamentalist, I might say, but a scholar, his view is that, well, Deuteronomy is where Moses is looking back on what happened in Exodus 20. So, for instance, let me pull that up again, and I think this is pretty clear, because a lot of people probably believe this. Give weight to your father and to your mother, as which Jehovah your God commanded you, in order to lengthen your days, and in order that it may be well with you, upon the land which Jehovah your God is giving to you. So his idea is that there is some commentary as Moses explains to the people this particular word. So we talked about that a little bit. Now, what we can do is let's start, I think, We don't rehearse these, by the way, if it's not obvious. But let's start with this idea. Notice in the translation that we just read, Jono, I said give weight. Now,
so the traditional interpretation would be honor. And then the question becomes, what exactly is meant by honor? So what is meant by give weight? I mean, we know what it's like we understand what it means to treat lightly.
That's right.
Something, but what does it mean to give weight to your mother and your father?
Well, you nailed it by explaining it the way you did with another statement. So, for instance, if we know what it means to esteem lightly, then this is the opposite of that. So, when you think about honor your father and your mother or give weight to your father and your mother, the basic meaning there seems to be, it's based on the Hebrew word kabed, and that indicates heavy. So think about some examples. In other
So
words,
Patty, sorry to interrupt. Patty
yep,
just said consider heavily, which is
that
probably
is
a
a
very good.
very, very good. That Patty, that's better. I'm going to put that up on the screen. Consider heavily. Not only do you consider heavily the person of your mother and your father, you treat them with this respect, but you weigh their words, you give their words, their advice, their person a lot of weight. And it's so important. And you think about this, Seth and Zach, my other son, and I, or one of my other sons and I, the three of us were talking today about this particular word. And what does it really mean to give weight? And I think this is real important. Now, the word occurs throughout the Hebrew Bible in various contexts. I tell you one that a lot of people might not know. A lot of times in the English, it talks about how Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Now, the English translates two Hebrew words as hardened. Everything we read about Pharaoh, he was hard-hearted, God hardened his heart, he's hard-hearted, heavy heart. Heavy heart is actually the accurate translation there. It's the same Hebrew word in many of those passages. The heart is heavy. Now, what does a heavy heart to us mean? You ever hear people, do they say that in Australia?
Yeah. As if something is troubling you, something's weighing on you. Something's
Yeah.
weighing on you. Yeah.
I think there might be something to connect there, but one of the things that we know is that in Egyptian culture, there was an idea of ma'at and the justice, the scales of justice. And maybe you've studied this as well, but it's like when, according to the Egyptians, when someone was being weighed, for their eternal destiny or whatever, you wanted your heart to come out light because you're being weighed against a feather. So
Well,
if
that's
you're,
interesting, isn't it? Because
yeah,
that reminds me of what is it, Ezekiel chapter 18. I know you're heavily into in Ezekiel at the moment. Well, the
yep,
complaint of the people, uh, uh, God says, your good can't outweigh your bad can't outweigh your good, and the people say, well, then the Lord's ways are not weighed.
yeah,
They're not fair. They're not, So it's
not
kind of
balanced or something.
not balanced. So it's interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, so one of the things, Peggy, and let me put Peggy's up. This is along the same lines. Another excellent comment. Don't take lightly the words of your parents. So it's this same idea. You can esteem with weight your parents, the person, the words, their advice, but you could also esteem it lightly, which means you just kind of brush it off. There's no substance there. There's nothing that really makes it count, I guess you could say. So one of the things that I think is important is the first part. Let's go back to our graphic one more time, Jono. The English, again, if you leave out the red, you have give weight to your father and your mother, and then we get into the commentary in order to lengthen your days. Let's look at that first part. Give weight to your father and your mother. This seems to be the absolute foundation of the command, and the rest of it is associated with it. Now, one of the things that I've heard, even going back to my Christian days, is that this particular word, this particular command is different than the other ones. What's the difference? Maybe we can ask our viewers too, in case any of them get it quicker than you.
Let's return to that question, because I just want to. This is interesting what Dave's written. He said, I think
Let me
if
pull it
you
up. Hold
have,
on.
or yeah, if you've
Yep.
got bad parents, still think about what they are saying, or when you judge what they do. And I think he's right about that, because it seems to be implying that you are obligated to prioritize what they say first, what their wishes are first, what their advice is first, before you turn to other opinions. This is that they are to be prioritized and considered with weight. Yeah. So,
And
sorry, your question.
well, one other thing about this idea of parents and so forth, one of the things that, like, I did a little bit of reading, and I wanted to know what some of the commentators said. You know, you check the Jewish Study Bible, you check various sources, and rabbinic commentary. What is it? What is it really? What is it to honor or to give weight? Some of the commentators say, make sure that you bestow upon your parents not just some love and affection and adoration and respect, but you actually care for them. You actually supply their needs. You load them down. The other way, there is a way that a child can make heavy their parents, and that's not what it's talking about here, right? But the idea is to somehow come alongside and support in some ways, is one of the translations. Or now, go
G'day
ahead.
to Kenny. And just quickly, Stephen says it has a blessing of long life. We're going to be talking about that in some detail very, very shortly, Kenny. Stephen.
That is right. That is right. So one other thing that I want to pull up now. Let's go to our Hebrew, and I can't really adjust this, so we'll have to do the over the eyes thing. Here we go. Now, what I want people to notice is the green. In all 7 of these Hebrew versions, they all begin with the same phrase. And you see it's the same. It's honor or give weight to your father and your mother. Give weight to your father and your mother. Give weight to your father and your mother. All 7 of these, Jono. Now, I don't know. I can't remember right off the top of my head. Have we had another one that every single one of them agreed all the way across in any respect? And I don't think they have. But there are pieces that are similar, and this is one of those. Now, the second phrase that is at least found in the canonical text is interrupted in Deuteronomy. Does my mouse show up on the screen when I do this, or no? I don't think it will. But where it says,
your mouse? No, it doesn't. I thought you said your mouth. I can do that.
Yeah. So it
Okay.
says in notice that Deuteronomy according to the MT and Deuteronomy according to the Samaritan Pentateuch both have honor your father and your mother, as which Jehovah your God commanded you.
Because that's yellow, right?
That's right. That's yellow. And the All Souls Deuteronomy, as you would expect.
Okay, now let me interrupt. This is interesting. All right, so because sorry, just bring that back up. Sorry.
Okay.
Because what we have then, if I understand this, so we see. Okay, so the Deuteronomy, the Samaritan Pentateuch, the All Souls Deuteronomy, the Nash Papyrus does not have that. And what this is saying is that it's alluding back to an earlier document, or as Nehemiah might put, alluding back to an earlier event. One of those, or perhaps both of those, could be true. And so this is interesting. The Nash Papyrus doesn't, and yet the Nash Papyrus does have. Now, what is this purple bit here?
The purple is that it may be well for you, or that it may be good for you.
Which is not in Exodus or the Samaritan Pentateuch Exodus, and yet it does appear in the Nash Papyrus. Very interesting. Okay.
Now, let me add a comment to that, Jonah. What you just observed, even looking at the colors and the Hebrew phrasing, what we know about Dead Sea Scrolls, what we might call rewritten Torah or rewritten Pentateuch from the Dead Sea Scroll community, or in this case, the Nash Papyrus in a way as well, Notice the All Souls. It has the Deuteronomy very consistent, but notice how the Nash Papyrus is going to have a little of both. And what I mean by that is some of these texts, what they do is they sort of pull together. They call it harmonistic or harmonizing the Exodus and the Deuteronomy. So whoever produced this Nash Papyrus, what they're doing is the scribe, presumably the scribe says, I like that in Exodus. I like that in Deuteronomy.
Let's just mix together.
And
Now,
and
is that not what we saw in the All Souls when it came to the Shabbat commandment? It
that's
really
right.
went,
That
well,
is
it says
right.
this in Deuteronomy, it says this in Exodus. Hey, let's put them together
Yep.
because they're both good. They're both good. Which is why it was considerably longer than all of the others, because it was combining, and there's considerable differences between Exodus and Deuteronomy in regards to Shabbat.
Yep.
Now,
And by the
believe,
way, I'm sorry, one thing, just by the way, if you look at these, like I've pointed out, you've pointed out, the canonical texts, Exodus and Deuteronomy, don't agree. Now, someone who is an apologist, someone who says, yeah, but God spoke both of those simultaneously, or however they interpret that, they want to pull them together. And I don't think that harmonization is the way to go. I think that's actually a violation more than saying what we're saying. In other words, let the text say what it says without interjecting and changing things. And I think that's what some of these harmonistic texts do. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, now, the last one that you have there, the Shapira manuscript, Moses Scroll, as you already mentioned, we believe that to be much older than these texts. In fact, we do believe it to be an authentic copy of the scroll of the Torah of Moses. And as such, we would expect to find a solution. Does it actually say, because we have here that you may live long upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and that it may be well with you, as it says in Deuteronomy. We should be able to find a solution when it comes to the Shapira scroll and go, well, yes, that's an addition, or no, it's not a tradition, it's part of the original text. What is the conclusion there?
Okay, so if we look at these texts, and I know that not all of our viewers can read Hebrew, but look at the colors. The blue across the bottom is a phrase that you just read. It's upon the land which Jehovah your God gives to you. That is lacking only in the Shapira manuscript in this particular passage. And so that's one difference between these. Now, the other thing I'd like to point out is, and we don't need the colors for this, the Shapira manuscript, as the copies were discovered, according to the 19th century transcribers, you had Shapira, you had Herman Goethe and Edward Meyer, and you had Charles Christian David Ginsburg. All of these looked at the text, and one thing that they all tell us is there were two copies of the manuscript, virtually identical, but this is one of the places where the two manuscript copies that were discovered in the cave in the Wadi Mujib, high up in the cliff, presumably ancient manuscript strips. One of the manuscripts had the phrase to lengthen days. The other didn't. So I find that to be interesting. So the question becomes, is it in or is it out? And what I did here, just to show it's in here. If it's not in, let's say that the original, because scribes are scribes. We know from the Dead Sea Scrolls, we know from the Masoretic texts that scribes sometimes add a little bit or take a little bit away. Sometimes it's a letter, a phrase, a word, whatever. In this case, if one of the manuscripts of Shapira's manuscript, one copy had only, get this was the word, give weight to your father and your mother. Anochi Elohim Eloheka. I am God your God. Give weight to your father and your mother. That was all it said. But the other manuscript said, give weight to your father and your mother. that your days may be long, right? Or that you will lengthen days. So I don't know. What I chose to do in my transcription was to footnote it. And as you recall in the book, I footnote it and say it was in one manuscript and it wasn't in another, because I want the reader, the person whose fate it is, to pursue, what's the right answer there.
So there are only two conclusions, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
One is that the scribe of one copy of the Moses scroll mistakenly left that off, or the scribe of the other included it by rote because he was familiar with the 10 words as it became to be known, similarly to what we read in Exodus and or Deuteronomy. What of course it doesn't add is what is added in Deuteronomy, where it says, "And that it may be well with you."
And by the way, which is a typical phrase for the writer of Deuteronomy. That phrase, "that it may be well with you," in various forms, appears in Deuteronomy many times. When you look at a reading, say in Exodus and Deuteronomy side by side that tell the same story, the Deuteronomy text will almost always add, "that it may go well with you." Not always, but sometimes.
So one view is, and this is my view, and I think you've got a different view, so maybe do we have time? I think we have time to talk about this.
Yeah.
So in the Moses scroll, when it comes to living long upon the land, we see that blessing, if you like, applies to all of the commandments, that observance of all the commandments will lead to them living long upon the land that the Lord your God is giving to you for you to possess it. We see that in, I think it's DC 9 and DC 10.
Explain to the viewers, if they don't know, what you just DC 9 and DC 10.
So the Moses scroll is divided up into, it's kind of like a verse system, if you like, but there are lines. And each line is assigned a letter and number, if you like, A, B, C, D. And DC 9 and DC 10, it says, "You shall guard his statutes and his commandments for the sake of your good." And when it says for the sake of your good, it's not for the sake of your righteousness, it's for the sake of your benefit. For the sake of your benefit, and for lengthening days upon the land which Elohim, your Elohim, gives to you. This is just prior to the giving of the 10 words. And so it applies to all. So I would say that it is curious. There's a deeper conversation to go into as to why it would be singled out over time into honoring the mother and the father, or to give weight to your mother and your father. But my point is that you may live long upon the land. It applies to all the commandments. It also in what is it now? HB2, I think it is.
Okay.
That conversely, the curse is that if you do not obey all of these commands, and let me get this. I'll read it here.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
No, I like the way you're thinking, and while you're looking that up, I'll just tell people, because some people might say, well, "Wait a minute, now you have two copies of this manuscript," and this is one of the evidences, in my opinion, that it is an ancient, authentic text. In other words, if I'm a forger, I think I'll be careful enough not to have these two documents read differently. And if there are differences, it certainly won't be in the amount of an entire phrase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this
quite
is
right.
interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it says in HB2, right near the end of the Moses scroll, Elohim, your Elohim, will cause you to perish if you don't. This concludes the what we call the consequences of the curses.
Yeah.
Will cause you to perish, and he will destroy you from upon the face of the ground that you are to enter there to possess it. Again, applying right across the board of the commandments.
Right. Because the covenant, these 10 words, are the central piece of this manuscript, right?
Quite right.
I mean,
Quite right.
it's not like you have a bunch of other laws. These 10, this is what God calls the covenant with the people of Israel.
And in the context of this, it's talking about longevity of the people upon the land, occupying the land. It's not in reference to the longevity of an individual's lifespan. But then there's the question of, or is it? Is this actually something that is separate to those blessings and curses, that is specific to giving way to the mother and your father, so that you will live a long and fruitful life? What are your thoughts?
I hear what you're saying, and it does make sense. It's almost like this is one of the benefits. It's explained, just like you said, or the consequences of not. In other words, for all of the covenant, if you break any of these elements, certainly I'm working through Jeremiah right now. In fact, this coming weekend I wrap that up. But if you violate the command and you go after other gods, you will not remain in the land, right?
Mm, mm,
So just like we read here in the one about honoring your father and your mother so that your days may be long, it does tend to apply to all of these words. And for instance, I'll give you another one. The violation, at least according to First Chronicles, the violation of the Shabbat, because they didn't keep the Shabbats of the land, as you
mm,
will, according to the chronicler. When they were gone, once they were exiled, the land was able to keep its Sabbaths, you see. In other
mhm,
words, had they remained long upon the land and had kept these things, they would have remained, but they didn't, and so they're off. So I tend to agree that I think this probably is very likely a phrase in this particular version. You have two copies of the manuscript. It could have easily been put in because someone knows this other text so well, uh,
mm.
and just placed in there.
Written in by rote, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is interesting. And then, of course, by the time you get to the first century, and we're talking about Paul in Ephesians makes mention that it is the first commandment with promise,
Yeah,
with a promise, and then that's the way that it's recognized from by the time we arrive there.
yeah.
Um, Interesting.
Yeah, and now, so we really don't have, we have this one, well, we have two, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, but there is a passage in Leviticus 19:3, Jono, I'd like to bring in. Uh,
Ooh, okay.
we've looked at 19 a few times. Leviticus
Hmm.
19 is considered by scholars refer to this as the holiness code. But some people might say, well, it's all holy. I don't, but anyway, Leviticus 19:3, in the English, it says, you shall revere his, you shall each revere his mother and his father and keep my
And
Sabbaths.
mm,
I, the Lord, am your God. Now, this particular passage, it's quite interesting because it's really that where it says revere is the Hebrew word fear, but fear can mean revere, as in hold in awe.
mm,
So what you get is sort of the same idea. Again, we look at Leviticus 19. Leviticus 19 is interesting when we think about the Shapira manuscript,
mm.
because Leviticus 19 has a series of commands which are close. If you read them, you think, this sounds a little bit like the 10 Commandments, the 10 words.
Well, there's a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
uncanny similarities, which would lead one to believe that this is just another attempt to recall the 10, Ross.
And look, I tell you what's interesting is that you have, like, you compare it side by side. This one is about honoring the father and mother, or in this case, each man they shall fear his mother and his father, or revere, put in awe. But notice it's signed at the end. I the Lord am your God.
Mm, mm,
Very similar to what we find in Shapira. Now, in 19, I don't know if you and I talked about this, Jono, but there was recently an article on thetorah.com, and
mhm.
and this author pointed out, I think Sue, I don't know if she's on tonight, but someone posted this on my wall. I would have missed it. I was face down in books. But this particular article said, notice the ones that are not signed by God in Leviticus 19. Notice, I'm going to tell people, this is your homework. Read Leviticus 19, the ones that deal with sacrifice and so forth, the priestly materials, no signature.
Is that right?
That is right. I went back and checked it. Mm-hmm.
I did not know. That's really interesting.
Yep.
That's interesting because again, we've pointed out, obviously, the Shapira scroll, the Moses scroll is in the first person, God speaking in the first person. He signs each commandment off saying, I am Elohim, your Elohim. I am Elohim, your God. And that's the way that we know this is word one, this is word two. It's very, very clear. But the whole document, the Moses scroll, does not necessitate sacrifice. We've highlighted that a number of times. And that's an interesting thing to point out in Leviticus 19. I hadn't noticed that before.
Yep. Let's see. I'm going to pull up Marlene's comment here. It could also keep the person from being stoned. Dishonor could be considered rebellion, hence living longer in the land. And she's right. A lot of people have taken this very literally, that you will honor your parents if you want to live. Some took it to that degree. And of course, we do have several texts, primarily in Leviticus and so forth, that a person who disrespects or dishonors their parents, you stone them. And one of the texts, in fact, I can't remember if Nehemiah and I talked about this, or maybe it was Seth and I talking, but in Deuteronomy 21, even there's this story. No, it was Seth and I talking about it. Deuteronomy 21, verse 18, talks about if a man and a woman have a son who is a rebel, who is rebellious and won't obey their voice, you bring him to the elders of the city, and you say, this son of ours is a rebel, take him out.
Knock him off.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, Marlene, that's right. It could very well be understood, at least in that context. That's the way many people did understand it.
It could be understood in that context. Again, returning to the Moses scroll, though, in the context of the Moses scroll, there is no death penalties in the Moses scroll. There is eviction from the land, and it's an interest, and that is the last resort. By the way, by the time you get to the end of the curses, that is the last thing to be said. It's like, you'll be cursed in this way, and this way, and this way, and then finally, you will be, if you persist in this way, you will be evicted from the land which I am giving you to possess. The corresponding curse, and just to remind everybody, in the Moses scroll, every single commandment that is clearly itemized by God signing off on each one has a corresponding blessing and a corresponding verse. And in this case, it is cursed is man who esteems his father and his mother lightly. All the people shall say amen. That's all well and good, but if you are to be stoned and put to death, where is the curse? So we've often asked this. You will be cursed if you do such and such, but also you'll be put to death. You'll be dead. So don't worry about it. It's either one or the other, and we don't find any death penalties in the Moses scroll, Ross.
Yeah, I was going to just add to what you said. When you look at the Moses scroll, what you have is you have, as you said, a corresponding blessing and curse with each of the words. And I heard you read the curse. Cursed is the one who esteems lightly his father and his mother. The blessing is, blessed is one who honors or gives weight to. And what we find, or what Jono and I have found several times, is that often when you look at the command, the word, with the corresponding blessing and curse, you get a better understanding of what it means. Now, I think in this case, this is an excellent example. You'll give weight, you'll honor, similar to what Patty and Peggy have said, and Marlene and others. It's the idea of you give weight, you pay heed, you treat it heavily, you think about it, you consider it, you weigh it heavily, their advice, their person, and so forth. And then the one who is cursed, not killed, but cursed, is one who esteems God lightly, or the parents lightly. The reason I said God is because my mind was jumping ahead. It's interesting, too, that in some of the texts of the Hebrew Bible, God is called Father. And so what's interesting is that quite often we do find correlation between what man is to do in regards to parent and what man is to do in regard to God. An example is Proverbs chapter 3. Let me make sure that's right. I did write it down. Yeah, Proverbs 3:9. Go ahead. Were you going to add something?
Yeah, while you look that up, so Ronnie just said, explain the signature, please. So, sorry, Ronnie. So, in the Moses scroll, when the 10 words are spoken by God in the first person, he finishes each word, and then he says, "I am Elohim, your God. I am Elohim, your Elohim." And then the next word, number 2, and then he finishes that word and he says, "I am Elohim, your Elohim." And we see, and there it is for all 10, and that's how we know specifically that there are 10. That's missing from both Deuteronomy and Exodus, but it does appear in Leviticus 19, along with a bunch of other, fairly obvious similarities in Leviticus 19. But what Ross was saying is that when it comes to commandments involving sacrifice, that signature is missing in Leviticus 19, which doesn't surprise us because there is no room for the Moses scroll does not necessitate sacrifice, so that would be added later.
Just by the way, just as Jeremiah said in chapter 7, verse 21 through 25, when he said, according to God, through Jeremiah, I never spoke to your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning sacrifice and offering. Just as Amos chapter 5, verse 25 says, did you offer sacrifices to me in the wilderness? So there are these texts, and there's this tension in the text that seems to suggest that sacrifices are not necessary. Hosea chapter 6:6, Micah chapter 6, verse 6 through 8, go on and on, Psalm 40, Psalm 51. But let me do this, Proverbs 3:9. It says in the English, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the best of your income. Now, preachers love this stuff. Honor the Lord and make your checks out to me, right? And I shouldn't say that. That might sound a little bit picking, but the idea is that what Proverbs is suggesting, by the way, to my knowledge, this particular text where it begins kabed, this form of the verb where we find it in the canonical text, all of our ancient versions, to honor or give weight to one's parents. That is the exact same phrase here. And I don't know if it occurs in this particular framework anywhere else. In other words, honor, give weight to your parents, give weight to Jehovah or the Lord. Interesting. Now, one other thing I noticed where it says wealth, this word in Hebrew is hon, hey, vav, nun. And that's not a real common word, but it's interesting. It occurs in the Shapira manuscript in the 10 words. We're going to get to that. In fact, when I was doing the recording this week with Nehemiah, he's reading along in Hebrew. His Hebrew is I tried to read some of the Hebrew without the vowel points. I'm horrible. And basically he said, let me take this, Ross. You read the English. I got it. You know how he is. But he brilliant. So he starts reading. He goes, he says, what is this word hin? Behold, what? He thinks maybe I made a typo. And he goes, oh, wait a minute. This means property or wealth. And so it's different than the canonical. I'm just planting a seed that something's coming that's quite interesting.
All right.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's EC8. It has to do with the larceny or theft that we're going to get to in a couple of weeks. So,
all right. So just to interrupt just for a second, because we started this, and I know we're trying to go for 45 minutes, but we're going to go over a little bit.
Yeah.
But just to remind everyone, because we mentioned very early in this program that you did 3.5-hour interview with Nehemiah Gordon, Dr. Nehemiah Gordon, no less.
That's right. That's right.
And that will be divided into topics and published on his podcast. If I remember correctly, I think it is called Hebrew Voices?
Hebrew Voices, I believe.
Hebrew Voices. HebrewVoices.com?
It's NehemiahsWall.com.
Nehemiah's Wall.
Yep.
NehemiahsWall.com. And his podcast, Hebrew Voices. And so he did a 3.5-hour interview with Ross We assume he's going to be dividing that up and releasing it hopefully over the coming week. I'm very eager to watch it. And everyone who's familiar with Truth to You is very familiar with Nehemiah Gordon. Grand. All right. So now, by the way, is this how it works? Are they going to be? Are people going to be able to get to watch this in advance on your Patreon?
But only because I didn't ask for permission. We did record, so what I plan to do is whatever Nehemiah publishes, I'll ask him if I can use it too. But I don't mind sending people to Nehemiah's channel for that. That's his content. But let's say that he says, some of that stuff, Ross, where you got into things that I don't want to talk about, he might leave those out. Seth, thanks to Seth, we recorded everything on our end as well. So we can now make videos and post them on our YouTube channel. Let me say one more thing about YouTube channels since we kind of were wrapping things up. So Seth has come on board. He's really helping me with stuff, and we're creating
Doing
videos.
A great job.
Yeah, we made our second short today, so it may be out right now. I don't know. I've been tied up. But Seth has been helping. We've been producing these videos. We've got a lot of other things coming up. People can join in sort of some behind the scenes stuff. Everything we do, we want it to be available at no charge. But the way that we get that done is people support. So even now, we finally crossed the 1,000 subscribers mark. So today, even if people chose that they wanted to support, they can click a thanks button on the YouTube channel, and they can donate any amount they want, or as little as they want, or as much as they want. They can also, one other thing, Jono, we do have the Patreon, and I'll post that graphic up. But so people can scan that code, they can join the Patreon, or there's something brand new Seth helped set up. We have a new membership on the YouTube channel. Whether somebody is a member of the Patreon or the membership, we are releasing and have been releasing a little bit here and there of behind the scenes stuff well in advance of when it goes public. So we already have a couple of videos up and things like that for that group. So final point, if they want to join, we call it the Yakad. You know what this word means? Together, community. It was the name of the group at Qumran. People want to join the Yakad, they either join the Patreon or they join the YouTube channel. So enough of that, but that's the deal.
No, I wanted to get there. Now, by the way, while we're talking about this stuff, the Jeremiah series, we're up to what, number 24?
Look, let me show you.
I've got to catch up.
See this? This is my week's work. It's 6 pages of typed notes that I have to. Here's what I'm doing. This is the season finale. This Saturday, 10:30 a.m. on Ross K. Nichols TV, right here where you're at. Among other things, I've been talking about how the book of Jeremiah is not chronologically arranged. It is now. And I have
this is what I'm waiting for.
Yeah, man. So
I've been waiting for this. Yeah.
People who want to see the book of Jeremiah in order, Seth is helping me do that graphically, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Brilliant. So that's this Saturday. You're wrapping that up. Dave's saying Ross is going to be with us on Monday at New York City in the Jerusalem Post Conference. You guys were at the Jerusalem Post Conference last year as well.
We did that last year, and Dave and Patty are bringing me back this year. Ralph Bunton is going. So this is a fantastic deal. I mean, we have former prime ministers, heads of state in Israel and the U.S., and it's a very pro-Israel. It's an event, first of all, to celebrate Jerusalem Post's long career of publishing Israeli news. But it's also a very, very pro-Israel thing. And I plan, I know Dave and Patty and I have talked about maybe going live from time to time over the weekend. We're going to be there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
There you go.
And maybe we'll do that on the YouTube channel for the Patreon and members anyway. So
good stuff. Last but not least, the Tanakh tour. We still have some room on the Tanakh tour. Good heavens. How about that?
Look at that.
Not only on the Israel tour, but also on the Egypt-Jordan leg of the Ultimate Tanakh Tour this year with an Exodus flavored tour throughout. And we are starting in Egypt, and we will be going, we're going all over the place in Egypt.
Yep.
We're going on a Nile cruise. We're going up to St. Catherine's, Mount Sinai. We're going to cross over into Jordan. We're doing Wadi Rum, Petra, and Mount Nebo, and all of those places. We're doing crossing over into Israel. This is the second leg of the tour. You can do Egypt, Jordan, or you can do Israel, or you can do both of them. And if you do both, you get a $100 combination discount. You only need to go to tanakhtours.com, TANAKH, tanakhtours.com. Place your deposit, secure your place, and you'll be with us in the land.
I cannot believe that this tour kicks off at the end of October. I'm honestly surprised that we still have places left. I really am. Yeah. But I do hope that many people will join us. We've got room on the bus. All you need right this minute, at least, is a down deposit for the tour that you choose. And then the rest of it we can settle up on later. But secure your place now. Let us know you're going. Jono will add you to our Tanakh Tour group where we talk about these things. By the way, you know the Tower of David Museum that's been closed for so many years, Jono? It's open. It's open now for the first time.
We've been waiting for that.
I read an article today, and it looks fantastic. So,
see, there's a few things in there we've been wanting to go and have a look at for a while.
Yep.
All right.
That's right.
We're going to have to add that to the list if we look at the itinerary. All right, you guys, that is it. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we hope that you will do the same again this time next week. And until then, have a great one.